As the couple joyfully carried the new addition to their family from the orphanage, Jonathan said,
"We'll name him after your family, Martha. The Clarks. You hear that, baby?"
Ma Kent added,
"From now on, your name is Clark Kent."
Kal-El didn't quite understand, though already he was picking up some English words. Within a week, he'd be able to talk pretty well. He had a super brain. As he looked back at the sign hanging over the orphanage gate, Clark accidentally turned on his heat vision. The invisible beams from his eyes cut through the chain that held up the sign. It fell on the director's head.
"I knew it. That kid is a jinx,"
he muttered to himself. The Kent farm was like nothing Clark had ever seen before. On Krypton, farming was done by robots, and his family had lived in the capital city. He loved the earth animals and the wide fields that gave him room to run and play. The towering buildings of Kryptonopolis could never provide this kind of open space. But one day, as Pa Kent plowed his field, he was horrified to see Clark chase a ball right into the path of the powerful tractor. There was no time to stop. A moment later, Pa Kent jumped from the wrecked tractor, which had been crushed by the impact with the boy's body. Clark seemed unaware of what had happened. His playsuit was ripped, but he had not been scratched. Day by day, Clark showed his parents what an unusual child he was. Once, Pa Kent needed to bring the cows from the pasture, and Clark decided to help by carrying a full-grown cow above his head.
"Drat, I'm out of matches,"
Pa Kent said. Clark decided to use another power he had perfected. Staring at the pipe, he sent out infrared rays from his eyes. Within seconds, Pa Kent was smoking contentedly, his pipe lit by his son's heat vision. One afternoon, the farmhands didn't finish stacking the hay. Imitating them, Clark completed the job in a few minutes. At least half a day's work for 3 men, and Clark wasn't even out of breath.
"A flat tire. I'll have to jack up the rear of the truck."
Pa Kent could go no further. Little Clark calmly lifted the back end of the pickup and held it while his astonished father changed the tire.
I should have had this cake in the oven an hour ago. It'll be late for the hospital cake sale.
Ma Kent sighed. Clark turned on his heat vision, and she gasped as she saw him bake the cake in moments, using only his eyes. The Kents had an old-fashioned wood-burning stove in the farmhouse. As winter approached, Pa Kent declared,
"I'll have to lay in a supply of firewood."
Clark watched to see how it was done, and then split enough wood to last 3 months in a matter of minutes.
"Fire!"
Jonathan's cry rang out through the house. Swiftly, Clark followed his father up to the attic, not even bothering with the ladder. Instead, he actually flew. The boy knew how to put out the fire. One puff of super breath came from his lips, and a blast of wind tore through the attic, instantly extinguishing the flames. Pa Kent was utterly speechless, not only because of his son's deed, but because of something else he noticed.
"Look, Martha. The blankets we found Clark wrapped in were right in the middle of the fire. But they weren't even scorched. I can't tear them either."
Pa Kent tried to cut the blankets with scissors and couldn't. He then tried to pierce them with a pitchfork. The blankets were indestructible.
At last.
Ma Kent said with relief.
Our super baby wears out playsuits so fast I have a hard time keeping him dressed. But now I can make clothes that will last. Out of these blankets.
Pa Kent smiled.
"How do you make anything out of cloth you can't cut?"
Ma Kent had a plan. She unraveled the blankets and knitted them into a wear-proof playsuit. Whenever the threads needed cutting, Clark did the job with his heat vision. Several years later, Ma Kent unraveled her son's playsuit. Adding more threads from the blanket, she made an altogether different costume. The blue shirt and red cape bore a distinctive S emblem, that one day would be known the world over. When the boy was 8 years old, the Kents sold the farm and moved into Smallville, where they opened a general store. By the time Clark started school, he had established a special image. He wore glasses and was known as a meek, mild boy who wasn't very good in sports. There was a reason for this. He had to be certain that no one would recognize him when he was ready to start his career as Superboy. Imagine the amazement of the people of Smallville when they saw this brightly clad boy flying over their town. At first, some were unable to believe their eyes. Others regarded the airborne lad with suspicion. But soon they all learned to welcome the youthful figure patrolling the sky. And why not? Stopping crime and saving lives became part of the heroic boy's daily routine. There were some, however, who failed to cheer Superboy's appearances. They were criminals, and they came to both hate and fear the Boy of Steel. As one put it,
"At least you have a chance when you're fighting a cop. But how do you fight a kid with a hide so tough? Bullets bounce off it like they were made of rubber."
One day, a bridge collapsed as a school bus started across it. The vehicle began its plunge to seemingly certain doom. Superboy zoomed in and caught it. The people were awed, but to Superboy, it was nothing. Thanks to his great strength, the bus seemed no heavier than a feather. But, important as these feats were, no deed was too small for the boy of tomorrow. Rescuing a kitten caught in a tree was as much a part of his day's work as capturing bank robbers.
Nice kitty.
Sometimes Smallville did not offer enough emergencies to fill his free time. He flew east to the Atlantic Ocean to save a tugboat sinking in a raging storm. On the small vessel, the grateful crew waved their hats and cheered. Soon, Superboy was honored by people of many countries who marveled at this youngster who did the impossible and who could not be harmed by anything. Well, there was one thing. When Krypton exploded, its fragments were turned into a glowing element called Kryptonite. Its radioactive rays could weaken Superboy, and exposure to Kryptonite for too long a time would kill him. One particular day, a Kryptonite meteor fell to Earth near him. Overcome by the green radiation, the Boy of Steel sank to the ground. It seemed that nothing could save him. And then...
Don't worry, Superboy. I'll help you.
The Boy of Steel looked to see Lex Luthor, who was new in town. Luthor pushed the meteor into the river where it could no longer harm Superboy. He was aware that Lex Luthor had a reputation as a brilliant young scientist. Superboy could not know that Luthor, who had just saved his life, would soon become a bitter enemy. As soon as he regained his strength, Superboy spoke to Lex.
You rescued me from certain death. What can I do to repay you?
Not a thing, except maybe be my friend. I'm your biggest fan. Someday I hope to do as much good with my scientific work as you have with your powers.
Superboy brightened. He knew what to do.
Suppose I help you get started on that now. I'm going to build you a laboratory.
Wow!
Superboy moved so swiftly that it seemed to Lex there was a whole crew of boys in blue collecting materials, building, and painting. In a short time, the modern laboratory was complete. It only needed the chemicals for Lex to work with. Superboy gathered these rapidly from on and under the Earth, and even from outer space. From that day on, while other boys played, Lex Luthor worked in his lab. Yet, Lex did not consider it work because he enjoyed it so much. The most difficult tasks, which would have dismayed many famous scientists, were enthusiastically tackled by Lex. One quest in particular drove him on.
I must find a way to protect Superboy from Kryptonite.
After many experiments, Lex determined that the first step in creating such a cure was to create a new life form. If life existed, it could be created. If it could be created, Lex could create it. He was that sure of himself. And at long last, he succeeded. It was a mere lump of jelly-like substance, but it unmistakably moved with the spark of life. Lex swelled with pride at this.
Success! I am the greatest scientist who ever lived!
He was so overjoyed that he became careless. As he flung out his arms in excitement, he struck some chemicals and equipment, knocking them to the floor. A fire started, and within moments, the lab was a roaring furnace. Superboy was patrolling across the town when he smelled smoke. The next moment, he was flying directly to the source. He was shocked to find where it came from.
Holy smoke! Lex's lab! I have to put out the fire quickly or Lex is done for.
As he landed, the Boy of Steel drew in a mighty breath, then let loose a powerful burst of carbon dioxide. The blast immediately extinguished the blazing inferno as though it were a candle. In seconds, the last spark flickered out.
Have I arrived in time? I hope Lex hasn't been harmed by the flames.
Superboy examined the lab with his X-ray vision. A gasp escaped from his lips. Lex had not been burned, but strands of hair were falling from his head. Within moments, he would be completely bald. Luthor scowled.
You knocked over my experiment with your super breath. My great discovery is destroyed. I can never duplicate it. You did this on purpose.
I swear it isn't so. I blew out the fire to save your life.
You knew that my discovery would make me more famous than you, so you deliberately ruined it. From now on, we're enemies. I won't rest until the world has seen the last of Superboy.
And so Lex Luthor turned from good works to a life of crime.